Okay, so I wanted to do a little video today talking about the Third World War and what people have been shown about it. So I only really twigged in the last 2 weeks that this is going to happen for sure. And the thing that changed for me when I realized that was I could see that this is something that's coming up in the future, because basically it's being seen by many different people, and they're all seeing the same basic details. Thousands of people actually in the United States are having dreams about this coming war, and the details match up with a shocking degree of accuracy and specificity. So you can look these videos up online on YouTube. If you look up Chinese invasion of the USA dream, I'm also going to put a couple of links in the description box to some good channels I've found which cover some of this material, and a couple of other videos from just the links to videos. So I'll put the links to 2 channels and then the links to some standalone videos, some of the better ones that I've seen which cover this material. So to summarize, it's a sneak attack. Well, okay, I'm going to talk about the Anglo side of things, so what happens in the Anglo nations, that's being the United States, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. The picture of what happens in Europe is much less clear to me at this time. I'm going to do more research on that in the near future, so I'm not really ready to talk about that part yet, but I can summarize all the stuff I've seen and heard about the dreams with regards to what happens in the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, a little bit of what happens in the UK, but I need to do more research there again also. So there are some very much some common themes to all of these dreams which all match up. So talking about the US first. It's a series of sneak attacks by Russia and China. Some of these dreams also give details about the militaries of other countries being involved in this invasion, and it's definitely Russia and China. Some of them say it's also Iran, North Korea and Colombia, interestingly enough. Some of them talk about the US doing something really bad, the US government to Colombia in the coming years between now and when that conflict begins, and it really pisses the Colombians off, so they actually send some of their army to fight in the US to kind of get their own back, to get even. It's really bad, unfortunately. A common element is that nuclear weapons are used early on, and a lot of the large American cities are hit with nuclear weapons. Something really bad happens to a lot of the big cities in the Northeast. A lot of these dreams have been showing some kind of exotic weapon using something like a hydrogen bomb and an underwater submarine drone. The Russians have some technology like this. There's something called the Poseidon drone from what I've seen. There are these enormous autonomous drones which can move really quietly and silently and stealthily over long periods of time, kind of sneak up, and then they can move really fast when they need to. But then they from what I understand, they shoot up to the surface of the water and they fire these ICBMs, these missiles, and you know, a lot of them have nuclear warheads on them. And yeah, a lot of people have seen that one of these weapons is deployed against New York City and it creates a tsunami about 100 meters high that just devastates the city. And then you've got radioactive water everywhere after that. People have talked about seeing something similar in New Jersey. Some of the dreams on the news reports, people are seeing these big red rings around those cities. There are invasions, there's landings on the beaches on the west coast. In California, people have seen in these dreams that Russian and Chinese troops are coming ashore in the summer. So summer in the Northern Hemisphere is June, July, August. They've been planning this for decades apparently, and they have all these secret super weapons which we don't even know about, which they're going to deploy. And the Americans are really caught off guard. They're really shocked too. There's something about the American shadow, so every nation and culture has a national psyche. And there's just a kind of there's just natural programmings in terms of values and character traits. Not everyone has them, but they're a general theme in the population of every country. I mean, that's why French people are French and why Americans are Americans. They have some commonalities to their values and how their minds work. So for that reason, they tend to share the same kind of psychological shadow. So there is kind of a national character, and there is to a certain extent a national shadow. Not everyone has it, it's the point, but it's a general thing. And you can see it in New Zealand, you can see it in Australia, you can see it in every country in the world. It looks a bit different in every country because they have different values and different priorities. In the US, it's a lot of the Anglo countries, when they turn negative, there's a tendency to feel superior to others. And there's a really strong arrogance, that's what I've seen. Very entitled. I'll just do what I want, I don't care, I'm better than you. I don't care. Like, I don't care about you, I don't care about how you feel. I'm just gonna do what I want. The positive side of that for Americans, you hear them saying that when people attack them, so it allows them to be dispassionate. But they actually, most people are good, so most Americans are good. When I hear my American friends who are positive people say, or good people say that, like, I don't care, they're saying it for regards to other people being nasty to them. They can disregard it, but they actually do care about other people. They're sensitive towards them. Here New Zealanders do something similar at times. But yeah, because there is this tendency in the American shadow to kind of think, I'm going to say the Anglo shadow because I can't talk about Americans, that's not fair because that's not my group. I should only really criticize my own group. So what I am going to say, and I have genuinely observed this, New Zealand is the same. There's a tendency to kind of, all the Anglo countries to be fair actually, I've seen it in all of them. So this is, yeah, and there's a tendency to see, to just have a total lack of sensitivity to the cultures of other groups and other nations in the world, and to often just regard ourselves as better and more capable by default. And okay, hubris, this is what I'm getting at, hubris. This is a very strong sense of hubris. So we've been so successful and so prosperous for so long that we can never imagine that anything bad could happen to our countries. And that's actually quite understandable when you look at the history of New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Canada, and the United States in the last 60 years. There's been so much prosperity, nothing really, really bad has happened. Bad things have happened, but not, absolute catastrophe, which is about to happen. So that's what I'm getting at here. And yeah, you can see that hubris in all of our countries. And, alright, this is actually really good. It's not the point that I'm getting to. It's not even really a national character or a shadow thing. It's, in many ways, just a function of where they've been at in their history. If you don't have your ego in check, you're just going to think you're invincible and bulletproof because, well, the precedent that's been set in recent history kind of says that you are. But if you've got a longer view of history and an eye for potential risks and dangers coming up, you'll see that there's definitely issues on the horizon. And yeah, so I guess where I'm just sort of working it out in my head here as I'm speaking about it. The hubris in all of our countries means that we're going to be taken off guard. We just can't imagine it ever happening. It doesn't help that Russia and China, as I said in the last video, that Deng Xiaoping quote, hide capabilities by time. That's what they've been doing. So that they're stronger than we anticipate. Their military capability is much more advanced. Another insight I had about this in the last couple of days, our countries tend to see military strength in terms of dollar figures and hardware. We don't consider some of the other aspects. For example, you could actually have a much smaller army and have spent much less money, but you could have much more advanced weapons, and you could have the advantage of surprise. And if we look at history, a really good example of that is the Spanish conquistadors and how they took down the Aztec Empire. They only had about 450 people, and they took down armies of tens of thousands. I mean, they did it with the help of allies, local indigenous Indian allies, but it was basically their really advanced technology and their tactics which allowed them to be so successful. So there are a lot of things that an invading force could do with really good intel and some really advanced weapons to nullify that advantage in terms of numbers of planes and lots of stealth fighter jets and things like that countries like the US have. And what people have seen in these dreams is that they use they're using EMP weapons. So they do, for those of you who don't know, electromagnetic pulse. I don't know all the details of how this works, but basically it puts out this energetic surge which fries all the electronics of the enemy forces. So they're kind of useless. Apparently they EMP 2 Pacific fleets. That's one of the reasons they're able to land on the coast of California. Apparently they're just drifting after that, according to some of these accounts. Apparently a lot of people have seen planes just dropping out of the sky because their electronics are all fried. Of course that affects the communications, the comms for the military, which is extremely important. People have seen in these dreams nuclear missiles hitting Missouri. They've seen them hitting Texas, the northeast area. Apparently, according to some of the dreams, there's some hit around the Seattle region, parts of California, near San Francisco. This is really, really intense. They're trying to destroy the US. They're like, you know, they're going for the jugular. They want, like, metaphorically, figuratively speaking, they're trying to cut the US's throat. They're there to destroy the US. They're not messing around. It's like, it's going to be a fight to the death, basically, you know, because, I mean, there's going to be nowhere to run. And, I mean, they're going to invade the whole country. Apparently, and according to some of these other accounts, Hawaii gets taken quite early. I'm still working out the timeline. I'm going to do a video on this in the near future. This is just kind of an initial warning of some of the details. I want to do a really in-depth study of many of these accounts, probably hundreds of these videos and comments. Then I want to really sift through them with a fine-tooth comb and determine all the key details, then put that in a proper presentation. Now my camera's going, my screen's going kind of fuzzy and dark as the sun sets. I mean, this is all pretty rough. But it's better to get some kind of early heads up out there, because you have these dreams for a reason. And a large part of the reason for me is to warn other people. For most other people having these dreams, they're warning other people too. So just forgive the terrible video quality, please. Just focus on the message. And the message will get clearer, like the image here, which is very fuzzy, in time. And I do plan to do some longer videos about it. But yeah. So I've had four dreams about these events, and I've had 2 of those dreams in Australia and 2 of those dreams in New Zealand, and I'm seeing the same event in both countries, which is the Chinese invading. And in the Australian dreams, I'm standing on hills to the south of Sydney, between the cities of Sydney and Wollongong, near a small beachside community called Stanwell Park. And I'm standing on the hill there, looking out over the sea. There's a lip of a hill, a kind of a cliff there, where hang gliders and paragliders jump off to, you know, pursue their sport. Really beautiful view. And I'm standing there, and I see these Chinese fighter jets come screaming in low, off from the horizon, where the sea is, looking out east, screaming in really low, probably less than 200 meters above the ground. And my first dream, I was there, and I felt really confused and shocked and frightened, because I knew something really bad was happening. I actually knew in the dream that we were being invaded, and I knew it was the Chinese. I just knew it in the dream. I couldn't really see the markings on the aircraft, but everyone else around me in that dream was so shocked, terrified, and confused. They also didn't want to believe what was happening. It was just too ugly to even want to believe. They just kind of froze and they were confused, but I knew what was happening. My soul was in the body of some Australians, so I was seeing the future experiences of what a person in Australia is going to have in that area when this happens. And then, yeah, I knew what was happening. And the second dream I had, it was in a similar area, and the same thing was happening, but we were seeing these jets coming in, and this time they were doing proper bombing runs, and they were dogfighting with Royal Australian Air Force jets, and it was absolutely terrifying. I could feel the fear much more strongly in that dream, and I began running with, I know the image is going dark, but it's irrelevant really, so just let it go. Yeah, I began running away with these other Australians from the coast, and we were heading inland back towards our houses. The feeling is that we were sprinting to get to our cars so we could drive inland. The feeling was that if we could get inland, we could at least get away from the invasion forces, because there was just this feeling of dread and terror and shock. We knew we were in danger. I mean, our lives were in danger, so that would make sense. I mean, if you could even get to the Blue Mountains, you know, or further inland, you would at least have a chance to hide somewhere. And they were bombing targets on the ground. So I knew in the dream that the Chinese Air Force was taking out the Australian Air Force in their jets so they could get air superiority. And you need that for when you land your ground forces, otherwise you'll have the enemy planes, you know, strafing and bombing your troops as they're landing on the beaches. So they were getting air superiority, and I knew we were being invaded. I could feel we were hopelessly outgunned and outclassed. The situation felt hopeless. Now, the dreams I had about New Zealand were really similar, and these dreams, both of them, I was in Wellington, and I was seeing similar things. 4 words come up: dread, terror, helplessness, and panic. And I felt sick waking up after all 4 of these dreams. I woke up in a sweat and I literally felt ill. That was how horrible the feeling was. I've been having these dreams for 2 years, but I simply did not want to believe that they were true. It was too horrifying. I just put it at the back of my subconscious and said, like, I just denied it. Deep down I knew they were real. I knew they were predictive dreams of what will happen in the future because they were hyper-realistic. They had the same kind of energetic signature and feel of those dreams I have about things that are going to happen in the future, and they are recurring. And many other people in New Zealand and Australia, more so in the US, have been having these dreams. But you can look up videos on YouTube where 2 New Zealanders have had these dreams, and there's also one of an Australian who's had the same dreams about the same thing. And I will put links to those videos below in the description blocks also. Remember what I said in the last video: when the dreams are recurring, when many people who don't know each other at all are all having dreams, and they're all being shown the same things, and they're all confident from their past experiences that these are predictive message dreams, which are prophetic, giving visions of the future. Well, yeah, that's when you know it's the real deal. And yeah, there are other people in New Zealand having those dreams. And yeah, I just see these jets doing these bombing runs in Wellington, and I'm just fleeing to get to shelter as these bombs fall. That was more what the first dream was about. The second dream seemed to be more symbolic. I could see all these Chinese these tanks and artillery pieces bombarding Wellington. I don't actually think that was what will happen. There wouldn't really be that much reason to do it. I think it was just symbolically showing how outclassed and outgunned New Zealand will be. It's kind of like a lion versus a kitten, you know? It was just, we just have no hope, no chance, and we'll be on our own. That's the really terrifying thing. The Americans aren't going to be able to come and help New Zealand or Australia. We'll be on our own because the US themselves will be fighting for their lives. They'll be invaded. New Zealand and Australia will be easy pickings. It's going to be really, really ugly. You know, the Chinese, most of them are atheists. They're raised under the iron fist of this totally psycho, dangerous regime. And a lot of their armed forces are going to have no mercy on us once they occupy us, because a lot of them don't know what it even is. They don't have Christian values. To be fair, a lot of people in New Zealand are godless, and it's frustrating, you know, to see what's happened to our countries spiritually, culturally, and morally. Because at least people in China have an excuse. Christians are persecuted there. A lot of New Zealanders just gave up on God just because they wanted to pursue hedonistic pleasures, and they just don't care. You know, I really do have a lot of sympathy and empathy for New Zealand and these other Anglo countries in terms of what's coming. I can't speak for the others, but a certain part of me is like, what do you expect, you know, with New Zealand? Because the culture's so dark, it's so negative in the mainstream. So, well, yeah, God's not going to protect your country if you sell out and you abandon all most moral principles and spirituality. There's so much weakness among men and women in New Zealand. A lot of them are just so lost. I'm not proud to be a New Zealander. I don't like to say that, but it's true. And I'm someone who's switching nationalities currently to being Spanish. I could be proud to be a New Zealander in the future, but I'm not proud of my country. There are a lot of good people there. They're a minority. They're not a small minority. It's probably 30%, 20 to 30%. But mostly, I'm not proud to be a Kiwi. There's very little unity. You see it I see this in my family. Like there's not really any honor. People don't have principles. A lot of cowardice. Really gossipy. Really backstabbing. In the Māori side of my family, there's a level of violence that we kind of need to invent new words for because it's so bad. It's so extreme. It's ultra violence. But they're not actually as bad as the Pākehā side of New Zealand European side of my family, who, they would just leave people to die and not care and kind of mock and backstab them when those people needed the help. And that did happen to me, but it has, to be fair, happened to other people in my family. And they just do not care. It's all about them. They just want to have, they just don't care. And they're really dark and negative. They just judge people. They gossip about people. They never stand up for anyone. They never have anyone's back. There are so many people in our family who have had their lives destroyed by violence and domestic violence. Other people in the family just watch. They don't do anything. They don't have a sense of responsibility for other people's well-being. The best you'll kind of get is they won't join in, but they'll never intervene. They'll never take action to stop it. There's no sense of that. People talk a lot about personal responsibility in New Zealand. But for most people, from what I've seen, that concept only extends to themselves. There is no sense of personal responsibility for other people. So they'll have a go at people and be really mean to them when they're sick or they need help or they're really struggling or having a hard time, and they'll actually bully them and call them selfish. And that's happened to me and my family. It's happened to others in my family. And they'll abandon them and do this, and then... But actually it's projection. It's them being selfish. It's this whole thing of personal responsibility. Our first responsibility really is to our friends and family. What happened to me and my family, people in my family doing that, but I saw them completely abandon people. Like, it was a woman in my family who married someone, and I won't say who, won't even say how they're related, and this guy treated her appallingly. He basically ruined her life. He abandoned their children. He completely screwed her over. He dropped her at like the drop of a hat and shacked up with some other girl, had a kid with her. This woman who married into our family was just distraught. People in my family, they didn't care. A little bit they were just judging her and mocking her and gossiping her. Like, not one word. And her life's just a mess. And they don't care. And yeah, most of my family's like that. I have a lot of friends who most of their family is like this. It's just a moral vacuum for a lot of people. They're just so ignorant, so arrogant, entitled, spoiled, narcissistic. A lot of Kiwis have really, really low self-esteem. Massive chip on their shoulder, can't handle criticism. They can dish it out, they can't take it. It's not all New Zealanders, it isn't. I am aware now that my family kind of sucks. And that there are lots of good New Zealanders, so it's not everyone, But the reality is, the country is going down a dark path spiritually. And the whole country of New Zealand is feeling it. That's why there's this crisis with, we've got the most expensive real estate in the world. That's why the inequality is spiraling out of control. That's why the justice system is falling apart. That's why this is mental health crisis. That's why we have the highest rates of bullying of any country surveyed. That's why we have the world's highest child and youth suicide rate. That's why we have one of the top 5 highest suicide rates in the world. The government is lying about the numbers. In reality, if you talk to Kiwi cops, they'll tell you it's more than double the rate that the government is telling people it is. But it would be too embarrassing. They don't want to lose face. So they're editing down the figures. They actually hid the report from the Ministry of Health with the true figures for the suicide rate from the last year, because they were so embarrassing they didn't want to let them out. They freaking censored it, man. Like, it's that bad. And it's terrible, but what can a country on a path like that expect? Something like this is naturally going to happen. And yeah, it's really sad. I have empathy and sympathy, but at the same time it's like, what do you expect, Yeah. And the whole world is going to go through this stuff. That's the shocking reality too. I don't think any country in the world is going to get through unscathed, come unscathed through this. But the ones that are on a really dark path are going to get hit a lot harder. New Zealand's going to get pretty hard. don't think you should be in New Zealand and Australia when this happens. If you have the money to leave before it happens, you should. Just get out. You do not want to be in a country under the military occupation of really, basically anywhere. It's never a nice thing. I think it could get particularly nasty when we've got a bunch of godless atheist communists who in large part have been conditioned to hate us. And I'm not kidding. Yeah, as I said in the last video, a lot of our girls and women are going to get raped. If you use one word about resisting on WhatsApp or Facebook, probably almost any digital application that has an internet connection, they're just going to come in the night and grab you and chuck you in a van, and if you're lucky you'll get a bullet in the head pretty much straight away, because they're going to torture you as well in a lot of cases. And I don't like talking about this. It doesn't give me satisfaction, but people have seen this in dreams. And you watch one of those other videos about a dream, one of the dreams that it's a young New Zealand woman who's had dreams about this. She's been specifically told there's going to be a lot of torture. I mean, this is absolute hell. Just total nightmare, hell on earth. You do not want to be there when this happens. There will be safe places you can go. I don't really know where those are yet. I suspect a lot of the developing countries and places like Africa and parts of South America. As I said, it looks to be happening 2023, probably summer 2024, that window between summer 2023, 2024. You've got time. I wouldn't expect everyone to believe this now. It's going to be completely obvious that we're really moving into dark times in the coming years. When people see this earthquake and tsunami happen that I've predicted in my other video, I think a lot more people are going to take my warnings seriously as well. So my purpose here is to help warn you in advance of these things that are coming, because it's going to get really, really ugly. I'm hoping I can get through to some of my family. Kind of feel like a lot of them don't even deserve the warnings in part right now, but definitely there are some beautiful humans in my family who I'm going to try to help with this, because, yeah. And people have seen some of the stuff that happens in some of these other Anglo countries. I tell you what, some of the accounts from Canada are just straight out of hell. Straight out of hell. Some of these accounts describe literally thousands of Canadians on a road being force marched out of a city. The people who drop off the sides of the road of exhaustion get shot and bayoneted on the spot. Then these people are taken to a large canyon and they're machine gunned. Everyone is massacred. Women, children, men, babies, everyone, the lot. And they're just throwing the bodies off into the canyon. We're talking about genocide. I'm not kidding. There are other people who have been seeing that in Canada. People have been seeing horrible stuff, like people getting beheaded, civilians on the streets in the US. I don't even want to talk. I mean, there's other stuff I don't want to even talk about. Like, it's too nasty. But I'm going to say that stuff to do with Christians being persecuted. A lot of this is people being put in concentration camps, and some of that is not all that bad. You know, I mean, as far as the stuff goes, they're on rations and they're being worked. They're not being worked to death. They're not being executed. But in some cases, that's happening. And dude, you'll be at their mercy. In most Anglo countries, at least in the US, they're heavily armed. So that's one of the reasons. If you had to choose any of the Anglo countries to be in and you couldn't leave when this happened, you would want to be in the south and the Midwest of the United States. Some of the dreams describe in the invasion truckloads of Russian and Chinese soldiers coming into these American suburbs, and the men and their families in suburbia they're just grabbing assault rifles and shotguns, and they're forming together in groups, and they're just basically massacring these forces. Not massacring, they're just killing everyone as they come in. Like, there are pitched battles, and these guys, they kill everyone. So there are pockets apparently in the US which don't get conquered. It sounds like they take over most of the United States very quickly. There are massive airborne drops. I mean, people describe looking out their windows and the sky is almost blanketed with, parachutes coming down. So it's right across the US. And it looks like there are marine landings on the west and east coast, but then they're just all throughout the country with these airborne landings. I mean, they're really going for it. People have talked about Cheyenne Mountain being nuked. For those of you who don't know, that's where NORAD, which is basically the command center of command centers for the US military. It's EMP hardened. It's designed to withstand nuclear attack. It's under 40 meters of granite beneath a mountain in Colorado, and they're attacking it. And they've got troops parachuting down. I mean, they're going for it. They're going for the jugular. This is do or die, and this is so insane. I'm not so shocked. I'm not shocked anymore. I've gotten over that now. That's why I guess I'm doing these warnings, but a lot of people aren't going to be able to swallow this because it's too much. But yeah, as I'm saying, if you had to pick any part of the US to be in, you'd want to be in pockets of the South and Midwest where the civilians are so heavily armed, and the right to self-defense and free speech is so ingrained in them that they'll just fight them off. So there will be parts that won't be able to conquer them because the people are too heavily armed. But in Canada and New Zealand and Australia, yeah, they got disarmed as part of this agenda long ago. And I can see it now. Looking back, they've been planning this for decades. This is why they wanted to get rid of everyone's guns. It was a frickin', it's just getting everything ready for this invasion. And yeah, so if you could be anywhere, you'd want to be in the South and Midwest of the US. I'm still learning about what happens to the UK. I need to do more research before I can comment on that safely. People have been seeing pretty bad things happening in England, which wouldn't surprise me from a collective karmic point of view. It has to be said, I'm going to say it now, there is a strong element of as you sow, so shall you reap. As the Christians, that's what it would be called, and it talked about, and that's how it would be referred to in the Christian tradition. The Buddhists would call it karma. In Taoist, Confucian traditions, they would talk about losing the mandate of heaven. These are all just different ways and different cultures of talking about the same thing. So there are spiritual equivalents for a lot of the physical laws. Karma is basically an equivalent, a metaphysical equivalent for one of the Newton's laws of motion. I forget if it's the second or third one. I think it's the second, and this law is that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. There is a spiritual equivalent for that, and that's karma. So if you run around murdering people and invading countries and machine gunning your civilians, raping their women in some cases, and torturing in horrific manner freedom fighters, people who fight back against the occupation, and you call them terrorists, and you kill millions of people in the Middle East, well, does that sound familiar? Because that's what our countries have been doing for decades. And it gives me no pleasure to say that there is going to be deadly consequences for that folly. Just as it gives me no pleasure to talk about what happened to the people in those Middle Eastern countries. Karma's a bitch. It's what they say, karma's a bitch. And it's going to be really brutal in this case. And I see it in many ways as a karmic reset. It's just clearing the slate. But it's not an accident that people like myself, who are really raising their voices against those things when they were happening, and were bitterly anti-war, anti-invasion. I'm not anti-war. I'm not anti-conflict. I'm anti-violence. Self-defense isn't violence. Those wars were violent. We attacked them. Conflict is necessary sometimes in self-defense, but that's technically not violence under natural law, how natural law works. It's violence when you attack other people and you violate their rights. And yeah, it's not an accident that most of the people in these other countries like the US and Australia who are having these dreams, more spiritually inclined people who are kind-hearted, who really hated to see what their countries were doing in invading those countries. And a lot of them openly talk about how the Americans were having these videos. A lot of them openly talk about how they say we're under judgment by God. That's the way they interpret it. And they say, look at all the terrible things going on in our country. Look at all the wars. Look at all the horrendous things we've done to the world. It's like, why would you be surprised that this is happening? That's what they say. I can't speak for the US, and actually I find of the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK, I find Americans from the Midwest and South to be the kindest, most sweet-natured, and just in terms of their spiritual core, they're the best people in all of those countries. By far. A lot of the people in the rest of those countries, there's a dark energy. And yeah, it's not an accident. A lot of people having these dreams are from that part of the US. So yeah, I guess I'll wrap this up soon. What can I conclude this with? There isn't really a couple of specific quotes I want to sum this up on. What I will say is you need to be ready spiritually and in all senses for what is coming. I've gone through hell on earth in my own life in the past 7 years. I still was given nothing more than I could handle, and at least I didn't get pulled into a war. and a world war. This will be so much worse than all the crap that I went through, and many other people who are on this kind of path have been going through. A lot of people I've met on my travels who are on this path have had their own lives collapse in recent years, but they still didn't have to go through a world war. You know, this level of trauma would just be horrendous. The war won't last forever. We do push them back somehow. I've seen in my dreams stuff happening in the future, in my own future, and it's in peacetime, and the occupying forces are gone. So that they will leave, you know. But you don't want to be there when they're there. That's the point. So if you know this is coming in advance, and you have the warnings, and you know that they're legitimate, it would make sense to just get out and go somewhere safe. You know, you don't have to risk your life. You won't have to risk your life, and there'll be just unimaginable trauma at some level for sure if you stay in those countries. So, like, you know, to be forewarned, forewarned is forearmed. So you're warned now. I mean, you know, if you hear the warning and you want to stay, that's up to you, but at least now with these warnings you'll have the option to leave. And I'm going to warn as many people as I can, or at least try to, because I know some will listen. Well, some already have. Just as some have already listened with my earthquake and tsunami warnings. I don't know if mine will, but these warnings are going to save lives for sure. And that's why I'm doing this. I'm confident mine will at least save a few. They'll get through to some people. Because those videos on YouTube have gotten through to me. And they were the reason I had these breakthroughs. I mean, there are people out there who made these videos and they've saved at least one life, mine. Because, you know, I really could have been in the wrong place at the wrong time if it wasn't for these warnings. So, you know, we're having these dreams for a reason. We're here to help. Please, please listen. And I'm going to make some more in the near future. Yeah, karma's a bitch. There's an unfortunate level of reality to the role that collective karma will be playing in what is coming. Please understand, I am not justifying what is happening. It's a tragedy. I'm horrified. I don't want this to be happening. Karma is the mechanism. It explains it. It doesn't justify it. It's not okay. But that's just why it's happening. We need to cut to the core of things. This is so serious, you know. These are horrifying realities, but the harsh truth here is that it's going to be a lot less horrifying than being taken off guard. And that's what's going to happen to a lot of people who don't get these warnings and or who don't listen to them. So stay tuned, because I'm going to put out a lot more in the near future, and yeah, be ready, because our countries aren't.